Parshas Korach. First thing we're going to do is we're going to ask a bunch of questions. Then we'll try to say one idea over from the Nesiv Shalom, which will hopefully answer all the questions. Near the beginning of the Parsha, Vayomer Moshe, B'zois teidun ki Hashem shalachani la'asos es kol ha'ma'asim ha'ela. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, if you see the following thing, with this you're going to know that I'm representative of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent me, that what? Ki lo milibi, that I'm not on my own. In Kemois Kol Adam Yimus and Eila, if these people are going to die, Korach and all those people are going to die like regular people, then you'll know that it's not genuine. However, the Bria Yivra Hashem, if Hashem is going to create something new, and the earth is going to open up, and it's going to swallow them, the Yardu Chaim Sha'ala, they're going to go down to the ground alive, Vidatem Kimiatu, then you're going to know that these people were wrong, and it's a punishment from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's basically, and that's what I skipped a couple of words here and there, but this is what the pasuk, this is the idea that the pasuk is saying to us. First of all, question number one: what was so terrible about the Aveira of Korach? What was so different about the Aveira that Korach did, that none of the punishments that were ever mentioned in the Torah were good enough for Korach? We'll see here that Moshe Rabbeinu says, how's Korach going to get punished? Only if we come up with a punishment that no one ever saw before. There are other Averas that the Torah speaks about, other Averas. Somebody will get Skila, somebody might get Malchus. But why over here was the transgression that Korach did so bad that nothing the Torah ever said was going to punish somebody was good enough? That we actually have to come up with some kind of new punishment for Korach. Nothing would have been appropriate. We needed something very unusual. Another question. The pasuk says, "Ve'altigu b'chol asher lahem." You shouldn't even touch anything. When we find out that Korach is wrong, you're not even allowed to touch anything of theirs. Why? Why couldn't you touch it? Then the pasuk also says, "Va'achala." Next question, "Va'achala oisam kiraga." I'm gonna destroy them. They'll be gone in a second. Okay. Well, what's the rush? Once we establish that he's wrong, so let's make a scene, let everybody see, let's talk about it, let's work on it, and then whatever has to happen to Korach will happen. But the pasuk says in 1 second, they're all going to be gone. Why did it have to be like that? Another question. We see also, the pasuk says that Nishehem uvenehem v'tapom, their wives, their children, and their young infants, everybody in that party was gone. Everybody went down also. The entire families, young children. So the question is, why is it that the children should go? What did the children do wrong? The children obviously didn't make any conscious decisions. Why did the children have to go down with the adults? So we asked a bunch of questions here. So the truth of the matter is, Rashi brings down a member. Rashi says, "Boyu re'ei kama kosher machloikis." To answer this last question, Rashi sort of gives an answer. Rashi says, "Come see how terrible the Aveira of Machlokes is." Rashi says that what? Bezdin Shalmata punishes when somebody becomes a gadol. Bezdin can punish somebody when they're a gadol, about 13 years old. Bezdin Shalmaila, when does Bezdin Shalmaila punish somebody? When he becomes 20 years old. And here we see by Machlokes, because there was an inyan of Machlokes here, that even young children died here. Even young children were put to death. So Rashi says we see how terrible Machlokes is, that it has a worse punishment than anything else in the Torah. So now we establish that the children went down also. But then after that it says that all the belongings went with them too. So why did it have to be that all the belongings? So now we see that the children and the wives and the families, and it had to happen in a second, and all the belongings went down too. So I just happened to notice the Chafetz Chaim, and this is it's a famous Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim in Shmiras Haloshen brings down, when he talks about the inyan of Machlokes, he talks about how terrible Machlokes is, and I just wanted to bring it in. I got my handy Sefer Chafetz Chaim here from the car. Comes out of the car, and listen to what the Chafetz Chaim says here. A few different things. First of all, kasha hi amachloikis, she mevia l'dei sakonis nefashis. Machlokes is terrible. It brings sakonis nefashis. Next thing, I'm sort of paraphrasing. I'm skipping in between. The kasha hi amachloikis, she mevias adam l'dei malchus. That's another thing he brings down. And then kasha hi amachloikis, she mevia l'dei misa. Chafetz Chaim. There are those that say that the Chafetz Chaim was the last person that they could say on him that the Chafetz Chaim could have had Ruach HaKodesh. So the Chafetz Chaim, when he says something, he knows what he's talking about. And a few pages later, basically the Chafetz Chaim says something like this. We don't have the time to go through the whole thing. He said, but if somebody says something about someone else's, about your child, you're right away going to get bent out of shape. You're going to get upset. You'll never forgive a person for saying something bad or putting one of your children in danger. The Chafetz Chaim says, however, he says what a person doesn't realize is that when he causes a machlokes or he joins a public machlokes, he's having no rachmanis on his own children. He himself is causing, he says, we see from Korach, that Haim u'nishem u'vneim v'tapam, that by you doing machlokes, he says, a person, it's such a paradox, it's such a stira. When somebody else does something to put his children in danger, you'll be angry, you'll never forgive them. But you yourself, if you join a machlokes, you yourself are putting your children at risk, so the chas v'sholom, children could die. So the Chafetz Chaim says that that's a difference. A machlokes is a kind of thing that, unfortunately, it causes that children, Rahman al-Islam, will die. So the Shiv Shalom says a very important yesod, and I just want to get into that to answer some of the questions that we just asked. It says there are inyanim in the Torah that sometimes the Torah won't explicitly say that something is asur, but we see from the story that happens how terrible it is. And then Shiv Shalom said one of these things is the story of Korach. You don't see anywhere in the pasuk, Vayidaber Hashem Moshe Leimar, thou shalt not have a machlokes. But we learn out of what happened to Korach that it's worse than anything else that may have happened. He brings out Gemara in Sanhedrin. Gemara in Sanhedrin says, Kol ha'cholik al rabbi k'cholik al hashchina. Somebody that argues on his Rebbe is like he's cholik on the Shechina. So the question on that is, why is it that one is his Rebbe and one is a Shechina? How could you say that someone is cholik? Obviously, a Rebbe should be different than a Shechina. He brings out and says, the Gemara in Ksubah says also, the pasuk says, Uboy Sidba. That we all, like we've mentioned many times, that the goal of a Yid is to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But we know that you can't really get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because the terminology is Eish Oichla. If a person tries to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he can be eaten up by a fire. So how does a person get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? He gets close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu by being close to Talmidei Chachamim. And we see that since like a person, if he does something, says something against his Rebbe, it's like he said against the Shechina. The way to get close, we see the Rebbe is the closest thing to a Shechina. So he says, so what happened over here by Moshe Rabbeinu? What happened here by Moshe Rabbeinu is that what Korach did is that Korach he sort of poured cold water on the respect that the Yidden had for Moshe Rabbeinu. Korach came up with something which was not true. He said things about Moshe Rabbeinu, and we knew Ish Moshe Anav Ma'id. Moshe was the greatest Anav that there was, and he shook the Emunas Chachamim out of Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael had a tremendous Emunas Chachamim in Moshe Rabbeinu, and he shook that out. And by cutting Klal Yisrael off from Moshe, he was cutting their Iker connection to Hashem, and that's what Korach did, and that's why what Korach did was so terrible, and that's why something had to be created. In other words, it never happened something like this before. To cut off a Yid, to cut off Yidden from a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Korach did something which had never been seen before in the Torah. So a separate new punishment had to be created for Korach. And that's why also, and that answers all these questions of why why the children had to die, and why it had to be done. No, the children didn't die as a punishment for the chait. It was such a terrible thing that Korach did by creating a machlokes and separating Klal Yisrael from Moshe Rabbeinu and thereby separating them from Hashem. It was such a terrible thing that now Korach infected everything. He infected the children. He infected their belongings. So it wasn't a punishment that we had to get rid of their belongings. It wasn't a punishment to the children because children don't get punished. It was as if everything was infected and everything had to go. That was a new kind of punishment. We have to start over. Everything that, once there's a ruach, a machlokes, and everything, and that's why the Chofetz Chaim says that children get punished, and young children can die if there's machlokes in the city, or if there's machlokes amongst people, not because the children are being punished. It's because we create, the person who made machlokes creates a ruach of machlokes, and then everything has to be off the board. There has to be a new bria. Everything gets buried. Everything goes down. You have to start over. So one thing we see from this parsha, the very important lesson to us, and how we have to be careful never to cause machlokes, never to be part of a machlokes, and that's what we learn out of the beginning of this week's parsha. And we should be able to avoid machlokes at all costs, and that's what we learn from there.